Let's talk about how we can decode request content from a JSON string into an array inside a Symfony form. I've recently had a situation where every single controller has to decode request content before we can submit data to Symfony form. Rather than using JsonDecode function inside a controller, we want to make that step part of Symfony form, but also make it reusable and decoupled at the same time. So let's see today a simple example where we typically get a request content and then submit it to Symfony form. However, we want to decode request content first and make sure that step is part of Symfony form. So let's begin. I'm installing the most basic version of Symfony using Symfony CLI. Then I add Symfony form as well as test back components to complete my initial setup. We can now create our first example controller where we simply output request content to our response. After that, I add a WebTestCase scenario inside example controller test to simulate a post request within our application. My post payload is a simple encoded JSON string so that we can see what goes in to the controller and what output is expected. As soon as I run my test, I can confirm that my response payload is equal to the request I've just sent. Now we can move on to create a simple Symfony form where we're going to deal with decoding part in just a moment. First, I modify our test so that we send an encoded payload with a name value John. I go to my controller and I create a new Symfony form where we specify name as a string parameter. When we run our test, we see that the form was not populated because request content is encoded. To confirm our setup is working correctly, I temporarily use JsonDecode function inside our controller. But what our goal is to extract that part and make it part of the Symfony form. Now let's extract our simple Symfony form into a profile type so that it can be reusable across our application. We create a profile type, and I'm adding an event listener, which is going to be responsible for decoding string into an array with data. I'm adding an inline version of a listener, which is going to listen on pre-submit form event. This means before we submit data to the form, this code runs first. We run our test to confirm that the request content has been decoded and the form has been populated. We no longer need a JsonDecode function inside our controller. Now it's time to extract inline version of the listener into its own class, and I'm going to use a subscriber rather than listener. The difference is that the subscriber itself contains information on what event name it should listen to. Inside JsonDecode event subscriber, my getSubscribed events contain information about pre-submit event, method name it should call, and priority number. The higher the number, the sooner this subscriber is executed. And as you can imagine, we want to run this subscriber as soon as possible because decoding JSON string into an array is for us a #1 priority. If we look at our profile type, it's a lot easier to read now. And all we need to do is to register subscriber we've just created. We can also use dependency injection in order to inject it via a constructor. And finally, we can create our own JsonDecodeType, which has only one job, and it is to register our subscriber. That way, we can at any point tell our form types to extend functionality with using a getParent method. We can also extend JsonDecodeType class and create our own setup using buildForm method, just like we usually do with any custom Symfony form types. Let's not forget to write some unit tests for our new subscriber and JsonDecodeType. They are decoupled and there is no reason to validate all the edge cases, for example, passing a not valid JSON string. I hope this was an interesting use case to go through with me, where we simply initialize a Symfony form, then we let the form handle submitted data, even though the data is encoded string at first. In this situation, when the form encounters plain string, it can try to transform it into an array to populate form fields like name with a value John or Johnny from our demonstration. If it fails, the form then becomes not valid, and if we loop through form errors, we can see exact reason why transformation failed. I hope this was an interesting topic to go through. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.